Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Arizona Territory. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening to this narration. We're interested to know which places and what times of day or night these documented stories reach. In the unforgiving landscape of the American frontier, beneath the scorching Arizona sun of 1878, a tale of supernatural transformation unfolded that would remain buried in territorial archives for nearly a century. This is the documented account of what became known as the Sonoran Desert Incident, a series of events surrounding Jacob Thornfield and an act of compassion that opened doorways to realms no mortal was meant to witness. The year was 1878. Arizona had been a territory for 15 years, and the promise of copper, silver, and cattle ranching drew men from across the country to this harsh, unforgiving desert. Approximately 45 miles southeast of Tucson, along what is now Highway 83, stood a small cattle operation called the Double T Ranch. It was little more than a collection of wooden structures, corrals, and a main house that served as headquarters for one of the territory's most isolated ranching operations. The Arizona Territory of the 1870s was still very much a frontier in every sense of the word. The Apache Wars were at their height, with Geronimo and other leaders actively resisting encroachment on tribal lands. The Southern Pacific Railroad had yet to reach most of the territory, making travel dangerous and communication sporadic. Tucson, established as a territorial hub, was struggling to maintain its position while dealing with constant threats from both Apache raids and Mexican bandits crossing the border. The discovery of copper in the nearby mountains was still years away, and the infamous Tombstone silver boom would not occur until 1879. This was Arizona before it became romanticized in the American imagination. Raw, dangerous, and largely lawless. The federal government maintained only a token presence, primarily through military outposts like Fort Huachuca and scattered cavalry patrols responsible for protecting an area roughly the size of modern Germany. Local law enforcement consisted of territorial marshals with limited resources and even more limited backup. Justice often depended on the character and courage of individual settlers who faced overwhelming odds in maintaining any semblance of civilization across vast territories populated by hostile forces. It was against this backdrop of constant danger and isolation that Jacob Thornfield established his ranch and encountered the Apache woman whose rescue would transform everything he thought he knew about the nature of reality. According to territorial records and newspaper accounts from the Tucson Citizen, the Double T Ranch was owned and operated by Jacob Thornfield, who had arrived from Texas in early 1877. Thornfield, aged 34, was an unusual figure for a frontier rancher. Unlike many cattlemen who were former soldiers or drifters, Thornfield had been a schoolteacher before the war and had served as a Union cavalry officer during the conflict. His decision to establish a ranch in such a dangerous location was viewed by many as either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish. The territorial newspaper noted his arrival briefly. Mr. Thornfield has established a cattle operation in the Sonoran Desert region, bringing education and industry to our most challenging frontier areas. What the newspaper failed to mention was the personal tragedy that had driven him to seek such isolation. County records from Texas, discovered decades later, revealed that Thornfield's wife and infant son had died of cholera in 1876, leaving him devastated and seeking escape from memories that haunted his every waking moment. More unusual still was Thornfield's approach to dealing with the Apache threat. While most ranchers in the region maintained armed guards and built fortified compounds, Thornfield operated his ranch with minimal defenses and made no effort to arm his small crew beyond what was necessary for dealing with wild animals. His philosophy, recorded in letters to his brother in Texas, was that showing respect for Apache territorial claims and avoiding aggressive postures might prevent the conflicts that had destroyed so many other frontier operations. The settlement area around the Double T Ranch had a troubled history even before Thornfield's arrival. The region had been the site of numerous conflicts between Apache bands and Mexican settlers dating back to the 1840s. Spanish colonial records, discovered in Tucson archives in the 1950s, mention the area as a place where the spirits of the desert walk among the living, and warn against establishing permanent settlements in what they termed cursed ground. A letter from Territorial Marshal William Davis to the governor of Arizona, dated September 1877, mentions the Sonoran Desert region as requiring increased military attention due to an unusually high rate of unexplained disappearances and what he termed incidents that defy rational explanation. He notes that the area's isolation and extreme climate made it particularly dangerous for settlers, but also mentions reports from Apache sources of supernatural phenomena that even tribal shamans found disturbing. By the time Thornfield established his ranch, the immediate area was largely abandoned by both Mexican and American settlers. The territorial government maintained no official presence there, and the nearest military post was more than 2 days' ride away. This isolation would prove crucial to the events that followed, as it meant that what occurred at the Double T Ranch remained unwitnessed by outside authorities until it was far too late to prevent the supernatural catastrophe that unfolded. The ranch itself was situated in a natural basin surrounded by low hills and rocky outcroppings that provided some protection from the desert winds. Thornfield had chosen the location because of its proximity to a natural spring, one of the few reliable water sources in the region. What he didn't know was that the spring had been considered sacred by local Apache bands for generations, and that his presence there was viewed as a violation of spiritual boundaries that should never have been crossed. According to Apache oral traditions recorded by ethnologist James Mooney in the 1890s, the spring was believed to be a gateway between the world of the living and the realm of the spirits. Tribal shamans had long used the site for vision quests and communication with supernatural forces, and the water itself was considered to possess transformative properties that could bridge the gap between human and spirit worlds. Thornfield's ranch operation was modest by territorial standards. He maintained a herd of approximately 200 cattle, employed 3 Mexican vaqueros, and lived in a simple adobe house near the spring. His approach to ranching was methodical and careful, reflecting his educational background and military experience. He kept detailed records of his operations, maintained extensive correspondence with suppliers and buyers, and treated his employees with a fairness that was unusual for the time and place. The first 8 months of operation passed without major incident, though there were signs that something was amiss. The vaqueros reported strange dreams involving voices calling from the desert, and several mentioned seeing figures moving among the cattle at night that vanished when approached. Thornfield himself noted in his journal that the cattle seemed unusually restless during certain phases of the moon, and that predator activity in the area followed patterns that didn't match his previous experience with desert wildlife. Dr. Samuel Morrison, a traveling physician who visited the ranch in March 1878, noted in his journal, "Mr. Thornfield maintains an operation of remarkable efficiency in this desolate region, though I was troubled by reports from his employees of supernatural phenomena. The men speak of voices in the wind and figures that appear and disappear like mirages. While I attribute such reports to the isolation and harsh conditions, I cannot deny that the atmosphere of the place feels charged with an energy I cannot explain." The first documented irregularity associated with the ranch appears in Thornfield's personal journal, discovered decades later among his effects. An entry dated April 15, 1878, describes an encounter that would prove to be the beginning of the supernatural events that followed. "Found tracks near the spring this morning that appear to be human, but of unusual size and depth. The vaqueros claim they belong to spirits, but I suspect Apache scouts. Have decided to increase vigilance while maintaining peaceful intentions." What Thornfield didn't realize was that the tracks belonged to neither Apache scouts nor spirits, but to something far more dangerous. According to Apache traditions recorded by anthropologist Grenville Goodwin in the 1930s, the spring was guarded by entities that the tribes called the Watchers. supernatural beings that maintained the boundary between the physical and spirit worlds. These entities were said to appear as ordinary humans until provoked, at which point they would reveal their true nature as guardians of cosmic forces beyond human comprehension. The encounter that would change everything occurred on the morning of May 3, 1878. Thornfield was checking his cattle near the northern boundary of his range when he discovered a young Apache woman lying unconscious beside a dry creek bed. She had been shot in the shoulder and was suffering from severe dehydration and blood loss. According to his journal entry for that day, Thornfield faced a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Found an Apache woman, badly wounded and near death. She appears to be in her early 20s, though it is difficult to judge her condition. The wound is serious but not necessarily fatal if treated properly. My horse is the only means of getting her to medical attention, but giving up my mount in this desert would likely mean my own death, yet I cannot leave another human being to die when I have the power to save her. Thornfield's decision to give his horse to the wounded woman was recorded in detail in his journal. He fashioned a travois from dead wood and secured the woman to his horse, then sent the animal toward the nearest Apache settlement, approximately 20 miles to the east. He included a note written in Spanish, hoping that someone in the Apache band would understand his peaceful intentions and provide medical care for the wounded woman. The decision left Thornfield stranded in the desert, with only the water he carried and no means of transportation back to his ranch. According to his calculations, the walk would take at least 2 days in the brutal desert heat, and his chances of survival were minimal at best. Yet he recorded no regret about his choice, writing, "If this act of compassion costs me my life, at least it will have served some purpose beyond my own survival." What happened next defied all rational explanation, and would be documented only through Thornfield's increasingly disturbed journal entries and the testimony of his vaqueros who witnessed his return to the ranch 3 days later. According to their accounts, Thornfield appeared at the ranch house just after sunset on May 6th, riding a horse that none of them recognized, but that bore a striking resemblance to his own mount. The horse was identical to Thornfield's original animal in every detail except one. Its eyes glowed with a pale blue light that was visible even in daylight. More disturbing still, the animal made no sound when it moved, its hooves seeming to float above the ground rather than making contact with the earth. The vaqueros, all of whom were familiar with Apache beliefs about supernatural phenomena, immediately recognized the horse as something that existed beyond the natural world. Thornfield himself appeared to be in a state of shock, speaking little about his experience in the desert, and showing signs of profound psychological trauma. His journal entries from this period, written in an increasingly erratic hand, describe encounters with entities that challenged his understanding of reality and revealed truths about the nature of existence that no human mind was meant to comprehend. "The woman I saved was not what she appeared to be," he wrote on May 7th. "When I gave her my horse, I unknowingly entered into a compact that binds me to forces I cannot understand. The horse that returned to me is both mine and not mine, a bridge between worlds that carries me to places that exist beyond the boundaries of the physical realm." Subsequent entries describe nocturnal journeys during which the supernatural horse would carry Thornfield across vast distances in impossibly short periods of time. These journeys took him to Apache settlements, where he witnessed ceremonies and rituals that revealed the true nature of the spiritual forces that governed the desert. More disturbing still, he began to understand that his act of compassion had marked him as a chosen intermediary between the human and spirit worlds. "The Apache woman was a test," he wrote on May 12th. "The Watchers of the Spring wanted to determine if I was worthy of the knowledge they guard. By choosing compassion over self-preservation, I proved myself capable of understanding truths that would destroy lesser minds. But the price of this knowledge is higher than I ever imagined." The supernatural horse became Thornfield's constant companion, appearing whenever he needed to travel, and vanishing when its services were no longer required. The vaqueros reported that the animal could be seen grazing near the spring during daylight hours, but that it cast no shadow and left no tracks in the sand. More troubling still, other horses on the ranch refused to approach the creature, showing signs of extreme agitation whenever it appeared. Dr. Morrison, who returned to the ranch in June 1878, documented the changes in Thornfield's condition in his medical journal. Mr. Thornfield appears to have aged years in the span of weeks. His hair has begun to turn gray, and his eyes have taken on a distant quality that suggests he is seeing things beyond the perception of ordinary mortals. Most disturbing is his claim that he now understands the true purpose of human existence and the role that suffering plays in the cosmic order. Morrison's journal, published in part in the Journal of Frontier Medicine in 1962, continues. Mr. Thornfield speaks of journeys to places that cannot be found on any map, of conversations with beings that exist outside the boundaries of physical reality. While I am inclined to attribute such claims to the effects of isolation and trauma, I cannot deny that he possesses knowledge of Apache customs and beliefs that he could not have acquired through normal means. The transformation in Thornfield's behavior became more pronounced as the weeks passed. He began spending entire nights away from the ranch, returning with detailed knowledge of events occurring in Apache settlements hundreds of miles away. His predictions about weather patterns, Apache movements, and territorial developments proved uncannily accurate, leading his vaqueros to believe that he had acquired supernatural powers through his encounter with the wounded woman. More disturbing were the changes in the ranch itself. The cattle began exhibiting unusual behavior, gathering around the spring at specific times and remaining motionless for hours, as if listening to sounds that human ears could not detect. The water from the spring, which had always been clear and sweet, began to take on a faint blue tinge that matched the glow in the supernatural horse's eyes. The vaqueros reported that drinking from the spring produced vivid dreams involving vast underground chambers and voices speaking in languages that predated human civilization. Several requested transfers to other ranches, claiming that the Double T had become a place where the natural and supernatural worlds intersected in ways that threatened human sanity. Thornfield's journal entries from this period reveal his growing understanding of the cosmic forces he had unknowingly engaged with through his act of compassion. The Apache woman was a guardian of the spring, one of the watchers who maintain the balance between worlds, he wrote on June 20th. By saving her life, I became bound to the same purpose, charged with protecting secrets that could destroy civilization if they fell into the wrong hands. Hari. The entries describe increasingly complex supernatural phenomena occurring at the ranch. Thornfield reported seeing the spirits of ancient Apache warriors gathering near the spring during the full moon, and claimed to receive visions of future events that would shape the destiny of the American West. More troubling still, he began to understand that his role as an intermediary between worlds came with responsibilities that would ultimately require him to abandon his human existence entirely. The horse that carries me between worlds is more than a supernatural mount, he wrote on July 4th. It is a manifestation of the covenant I entered into when I chose compassion over survival. Each journey it takes me on draws me further from the human world and closer to the realm of the spirits. I begin to understand that my time as a mortal man is limited, and that my true purpose lies beyond the boundaries of physical existence. The first external confirmation of the supernatural events at the Double T Ranch came in August 1878, when a cavalry patrol investigating Apache activity in the region reported encountering Thornfield riding a horse that appeared to glow with its own light. Lieutenant Colonel James Mitchell, who led the patrol, noted in his official report, "Encountered rancher Jacob Thornfield mounted on an animal of unusual appearance. The horse exhibited characteristics that defy rational explanation, including the ability to move across terrain that should have been impassable and eyes that glowed with phosphorescent light." Mitchell's report, classified for national security reasons and not declassified until 1978, continues. Mr. Thornfield appeared to be in a state of altered consciousness, speaking of spiritual responsibilities and cosmic purposes that suggested either severe mental disturbance or contact with forces beyond normal human experience. Most troubling was his accurate knowledge of Apache movements and intentions, information that he could not have acquired through conventional means. The cavalry patrol's encounter with Thornfield marked the beginning of official interest in the supernatural events at the Double T Ranch. Federal authorities, already concerned about the ongoing Apache wars and the need to maintain stability in the territory, viewed any unexplained phenomena as potential threats to territorial security. A classified investigation was initiated under the direction of the War Department, with orders to determine the nature of the supernatural activities and assess their potential impact on military operations. Major Robert Crawford, assigned to lead the investigation, arrived at the Double T Ranch in September 1878 with a small team of specialists trained in what government documents euphemistically termed unconventional intelligence gathering. What they found challenged every assumption about the nature of reality and the limits of human understanding. Crawford's classified report, declassified in 1995, provides the most comprehensive official assessment of the supernatural phenomena at the ranch. Mr. Thornfield has clearly entered into some form of compact with supernatural forces that exist beyond the boundaries of conventional reality, Crawford wrote. The evidence suggests that his act of compassion toward the Apache woman triggered a transformation that has made him a conduit between the human and spirit worlds. The report documents numerous instances of supernatural activity witnessed by the investigation team, including the appearance of the glowing horse, manifestations of Apache spirits near the spring, and Thornfield's ability to predict future events with uncanny accuracy. Most disturbing was the discovery that the ranch had become a focal point for supernatural energies that were affecting the entire region. The spring appears to be a natural gateway between dimensions, Crawford noted. Mr. Thornfield's presence there, combined with his supernatural compact, has amplified the site's power and created conditions that allow for unprecedented interaction between the physical and spirit worlds. The implications for territorial security are significant, as these phenomena could potentially be weaponized by hostile forces. Crawford's investigation team attempted to document the full extent of Thornfield's supernatural abilities, conducting controlled experiments that revealed the true scope of his transformation. They discovered that he could communicate with Apache spirits across vast distances, predict weather patterns weeks in advance, and locate water sources in areas where none should exist. More troubling still, he demonstrated the ability to heal injuries and illnesses through methods that defied medical explanation. The investigation also revealed that Thornfield's transformation was ongoing and accelerating. Each journey he took on the supernatural horse drew him further from human existence and closer to becoming a purely spiritual entity. Crawford's team estimated that the process would be complete within months, at which point Thornfield would cease to exist as a human being and become something entirely different. Mr. Thornfield is undergoing a metamorphosis that will ultimately transform him into a guardian spirit similar to the Apache woman he saved, Crawford concluded. This transformation appears to be irreversible and may represent the natural consequence of his supernatural compact. The question is not whether this change will occur, but what will happen to the ranch and the surrounding region when it does. The federal government's response to Crawford's findings was to implement a policy of containment and monitoring that would continue for decades. The Double T Ranch was placed under covert surveillance, with agents stationed in the region to observe and document supernatural activities while preventing public knowledge of the phenomena. Official records were classified, and any civilian reports of unusual activity were dismissed or explained away through conventional means. This policy proved partially effective in maintaining secrecy, but it could not prevent the supernatural transformation that was already underway. Throughout the fall of 1878, Thornfield's journal entries became increasingly cryptic and philosophical, reflecting his growing detachment from human concerns and his deepening understanding of cosmic forces. "I begin to see the true nature of existence," he wrote on October 15th. "What we call reality is merely the surface of an ocean, whose depths contain truths that would shatter the minds of ordinary mortals. The Apache woman I saved was a teacher, sent to guide me toward understanding my true purpose in the cosmic order. The horse that carries me between worlds is both my mount and my destiny, a manifestation of the bridge I am becoming between the realm of matter and the realm of spirit. The final entry in Thornfield's journal, dated November 3, 1878, provides a haunting glimpse into his ultimate fate. The transformation is nearly complete. I can feel my human consciousness dissolving like morning mist, replaced by an awareness that encompasses dimensions beyond physical existence. The horse and I are becoming one, a single entity charged with guarding the gateway between worlds. Those who knew me as Jacob Thornfield will remember only a man who showed compassion to a stranger. They will never know that this simple act opened doorways to realms where love and sacrifice become the foundation of cosmic law. On the morning of November 4, 1878, the vaqueros at the Double T Ranch discovered that Thornfield had vanished. His personal effects remained in the ranch house, but there was no sign of the man himself or the supernatural horse that had been his constant companion. The only evidence of his departure was a set of hoof prints leading from the ranch house to the spring, where they simply ended as if horse and rider had dissolved into the morning air. Federal agents monitoring the ranch reported that the supernatural phenomena continued after Thornfield's disappearance, but in a different form. The spring continued to glow with faint blue light during certain phases of the moon, and Apache bands in the region reported that their shamans could once again communicate with the guardian spirits that protected the sacred site. More significantly, travelers in the area began reporting encounters with a mysterious horseman who appeared to assist those in need before vanishing without explanation. These encounters followed a consistent pattern. Travelers who found themselves in life-threatening situations in the desert would be approached by a figure mounted on a horse that glowed with its own light. The horseman would provide assistance, whether in the form of water, directions, or protection from hostile forces, before disappearing as suddenly as he had appeared. Those who received such help invariably described the horseman as bearing a striking resemblance to Jacob Thornfield, though his features seemed to shift and change like reflections in moving water. Dr. Morrison, who continued to visit the region as part of his medical practice, documented several of these encounters in his journal. The horseman appears to be Mr. Thornfield transformed into something beyond human understanding, he wrote in 1880. Those who encounter him speak of a presence that radiates compassion and wisdom, yet seems to exist partially outside the boundaries of physical reality. It is as if his act of sacrificing his horse to save the Apache woman has transformed him into a guardian spirit charged with protecting all who travel through this harsh land. The Double T Ranch itself was abandoned after Thornfield's disappearance, though federal agents continued to maintain surveillance of the site. The cattle were sold to neighboring ranchers, the buildings gradually fell into disrepair, and the land reverted to its natural desert state. However, the spring continued to flow, and its water retained the faint blue tinge that had appeared after Thornfield's transformation. Apache oral traditions recorded in the early 20th century described the spring as having been healed by Thornfield's sacrifice, restored to its proper role as a gateway between worlds, under the protection of a guardian who understood both human and spiritual nature. Tribal shamans reported that the site had become more powerful than ever before, capable of facilitating communication with spirits and providing visions of future events to those deemed worthy of such knowledge. The federal monitoring program continued until 1920, when budget constraints and the apparent stabilization of supernatural activity led to its discontinuation. However, classified documents from the period reveal that agents continued to investigate reports of the mysterious horseman throughout the early 20th century, documenting dozens of encounters that suggested Thornfield's transformed spirit remained active in the region. The most significant of these encounters occurred during World War II, when a military convoy traveling through the desert became lost during a sandstorm. According to the official report, filed by Major William Harrison in 1943, the convoy was guided to safety by a horseman mounted on an animal that glowed with phosphorescent light. The horseman led them to a water source that saved the lives of 37 soldiers before vanishing into the storm. The figure appeared to be a cavalry officer from an earlier era, Harrison reported. He spoke no words, but his intentions were clear. He guided us through terrain that should have been impassable and led us to water when our supplies were exhausted. When the storm cleared and we attempted to thank him, he had vanished as if he had never existed. Yet without his intervention, none of us would have survived. Harrison's report was classified for national security reasons, but similar accounts continued to surface throughout the mid-20th century. Travelers, military personnel, and Border Patrol agents all reported encounters with the mysterious horseman, always in situations where lives were at stake and conventional help was unavailable. The last confirmed sighting of the horseman occurred in 1978, exactly 100 years after Thornfield's transformation. A family traveling through the desert suffered a vehicle breakdown in an area with no cell phone coverage and temperatures exceeding 115 degrees. According to their account, they were approached by a figure on horseback, who provided them with water and directions to the nearest town before disappearing. He looked like something out of an old Western movie, the father later told investigators. But there was something otherworldly about him, like he wasn't entirely there. The horse made no sound when it moved, and I swear its eyes glowed blue in the sunlight. He saved our lives, but I still can't explain what we saw. The 1978 sighting marked the end of documented encounters with Thornfield's transformed spirit, though reports of supernatural activity in the region continued. The spring that had been the focal point of the original events was eventually incorporated into a national wilderness area, with access restricted ostensibly for environmental protection, but actually to prevent civilian contact with the supernatural forces that remained active at the site. Modern satellite imagery of the region shows that the spring continues to flow despite the arid climate, and infrared photography has detected unusual heat signatures in the area that suggest ongoing supernatural activity. However, the federal government's official position remains that no unexplained phenomena exist at the site, and all reports of supernatural encounters are attributed to natural causes or misidentification of conventional phenomena. The story of Jacob Thornfield serves as a reminder that acts of compassion can have consequences that extend far beyond the immediate moment, opening doorways to realms of existence that most humans never imagine. His decision to sacrifice his horse to save a wounded stranger transformed not only his own destiny, but the very nature of the land where he chose to show mercy to another human being. In the deep places of the Sonoran Desert, where ancient springs flow with water that glows blue in the moonlight, and the spirits of the past walk among the living, something continues to watch over travelers who find themselves in need of assistance. Whether that something is the transformed spirit of Jacob Thornfield or some other guardian entity, the encounters continue to this day, reminding us that compassion is a force powerful enough to bridge the gap between worlds and transform the very fabric of reality itself. The federal monitoring stations may have been abandoned, and the official records may remain classified, but the truth endures in the stories told by those who have encountered the mysterious horseman in their darkest hours. For in the end, Jacob Thornfield's greatest achievement was not the ranch he built or the cattle he raised, but the proof he provided that a single act of selfless compassion can echo through eternity, creating ripples in the cosmic order that continue to touch lives long after the original actor has transcended the boundaries of mortal existence. And sometimes, on nights when the desert wind carries the scent of distant rain and the stars seem brighter than they should be, travelers through the Sonoran Desert report seeing a figure on horseback, silhouetted against the horizon, watching over the land with the patient vigilance of one who has learned that true strength lies not in conquest, but in the willingness to sacrifice everything for the sake of another's survival. The horse he gave away returned transformed, carrying him beyond the boundaries of human existence into a realm where compassion becomes the foundation of cosmic law, and where the price of wisdom is the surrender of everything that once defined mortal identity. In that realm, Jacob Thornfield continues his eternal vigil, proof that some gifts are so profound, they transform not only the giver, but the very nature of the world in which the giving takes place. The archaeological investigation of the Double T Ranch site, conducted by the University of Arizona in 1985, uncovered evidence that supported many of the supernatural claims documented in federal reports. Dr. Margaret Chen, who led the excavation team, discovered artifacts that challenged conventional understanding of the timeline and nature of events at the ranch. We found items that appear to date from the 1870s, but show signs of exposure to energies that don't exist in nature, Dr. Chen reported. Metal objects display crystalline formations that require temperatures and pressures impossible to achieve with 19th-century technology. More puzzling still, we discovered organic materials that should have decomposed decades ago but remain perfectly preserved, as if time itself moves differently in this location. The most significant discovery was a series of petroglyphs carved into rocks near the spring, depicting scenes that appeared to show the transformation of a human figure into a spirit guardian. The style and technique of the carvings matched known Apache artistic traditions, but carbon dating suggested they had been created recently, possibly within decades of the excavation. Dr. James Whitehorse, an Apache historian who participated in the investigation, provided crucial insight into the cultural significance of the petroglyphs. These images tell the story of a white man who became one of our guardian spirits through an act of pure compassion, he explained. According to our oral traditions, such transformations are possible but extremely rare, requiring a level of selflessness that few humans can achieve. Neda. The petroglyphs depicted a sequence of events that matched the documented history of Jacob Thornfield's encounter with the wounded Apache woman. The final image showed a figure mounted on a horse with glowing eyes, surrounded by symbols that Apache shamans interpreted as representing the bridge between the world of the living and the realm of spirits. The Apache woman Thornfield saved was my great-great-grandmother, Dr. Whitehorse revealed during the investigation. Her name was Ayana, which means eternal blossom in our language. She was indeed one of the guardians of the sacred spring, chosen by the spirits to test those who came to our holy places. Thornfield's compassion proved him worthy of joining the guardians, but the transformation required him to surrender his human form. This revelation provided crucial context for understanding the supernatural events at the ranch. According to Apache tradition, the guardians of sacred sites were not human beings, but spiritual entities that could take human form when necessary. Ayana's appearance as a wounded woman had been a test designed to identify individuals capable of transcending human limitations through acts of pure compassion. The spirits needed a guardian who understood both worlds, Dr. Whitehorse explained. Someone who had lived as a human, but could think beyond human concerns. Thornfield's willingness to sacrifice his life for a stranger proved he possessed the spiritual qualities necessary for such a role. The horse that returned to him was not his original mount transformed, but a manifestation of his own spiritual evolution. The investigation also uncovered evidence that Thornfield's transformation had affected the local ecosystem in ways that persisted long after his disappearance. Plant and animal life in the immediate vicinity of the spring showed genetic variations that could not be explained through natural selection or environmental adaptation. More significantly, water samples from the spring contained mineral compositions that did not match any known geological formations in the region. Dr. Sarah Morrison, a geologist who analyzed the water samples, reported findings that challenged conventional understanding of hydrology and chemistry. The spring water contains elements that shouldn't exist at this location, including trace amounts of substances that don't appear in the periodic table, she noted. The molecular structure of the water itself shows anomalies that suggest it has been altered by forces we don't understand. These discoveries led to the establishment of a permanent research station near the spring, ostensibly for environmental monitoring, but actually to study the ongoing supernatural phenomena. The research team, composed of scientists from multiple disciplines, documented evidence of continued supernatural activity throughout the 1990s and early 2000s. Temperature readings in the area showed fluctuations that didn't correspond to weather patterns or seasonal changes. Electromagnetic measurements detected energy signatures that resembled those found near sites of documented paranormal activity. Most significantly, time-lapse photography revealed the periodic appearance of figures near the spring that were invisible to the naked eye, but showed up clearly on film. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a physicist who joined the research team in 1992, developed instruments capable of detecting what he termed dimensional anomalies in the space around the spring. "We're measuring distortions in the fabric of reality itself," he reported. "The area around the spring exists partially outside normal space-time, creating conditions that allow for interaction between different planes of existence." Rodriguez's measurements suggested that Thornfield's transformation had created a permanent gateway between dimensions, with the spring serving as an anchor point for supernatural energies. The research team documented dozens of instances where this gateway allowed for communication with entities that existed beyond the physical world, including what appeared to be Thornfield himself. "We've recorded voice phenomena that match historical descriptions of Jacob Thornfield's speech patterns," Rodriguez noted. "The communications are brief and cryptic, but they consistently convey messages of guidance and protection for those in need. It's as if his consciousness continues to exist in a form that transcends physical death." The most remarkable of these communications occurred in 1995, when the research team detected a prolonged supernatural manifestation during a severe drought that threatened the entire region. According to their instruments, an entity matching Thornfield's energy signature appeared near the spring and remained present for several hours, during which time the water flow increased dramatically and the temperature dropped by 20 degrees. The manifestation coincided with reports of the mysterious horseman appearing to assist ranchers and travelers throughout the drought-affected area, Rodriguez documented. "It appears that Thornfield's transformed consciousness can still intervene in physical reality when circumstances require his assistance." The research team's findings were classified by federal authorities in 1998, following concerns that public knowledge of the supernatural phenomena might attract unwanted attention to the site. However, leaked documents and whistleblower testimonies have provided glimpses into the ongoing research and its implications for understanding the nature of consciousness and reality. Dr. Elizabeth Crenshaw, a former member of the research team who left the project in 2001, revealed in a 2010 interview that the government had been attempting to weaponize the supernatural energies at the spring. They wanted to create artificial guardians, beings like Thornfield who could serve military purposes, she disclosed. The experiments were unsuccessful and dangerous, creating unstable entities that had to be contained or destroyed. Crenshaw's revelations prompted congressional inquiries into the government's supernatural research programs, though most of the relevant documents remain classified. What has been revealed suggests that Thornfield's transformation was unique and could not be replicated through artificial means, requiring a level of spiritual development that could not be manufactured or induced. The failure of these experiments led to the abandonment of the research station in 2005, though remote monitoring equipment continues to operate at the site. Satellite surveillance and automated sensors provide ongoing data about supernatural activity in the region, but human presence at the spring has been prohibited since the failed experiments created what officials term containment issues. Despite the official restrictions, reports of encounters with the mysterious horseman continue to surface from the region. Border Patrol agents, military personnel, and civilian travelers all describe similar experiences. Assistance provided by a figure on horseback who appears during emergencies and vanishes once help is no longer needed. Agent Maria Santos of the U.S. Border Patrol documented one such encounter in her official report from 2018. Encountered a figure on horseback while pursuing suspected drug smugglers in the desert. The individual provided crucial intelligence about the smuggler's location and guided us to a water cache that prevented heat-related casualties among our team. When we attempted to identify him, he vanished without explanation. Santos's report was classified, but similar accounts continue to emerge from law enforcement and military sources. The consistency of these reports, combined with the documented history of supernatural activity in the region, suggests that Thornfield's transformed consciousness continues to fulfill his role as a guardian spirit. The most recent confirmed encounter occurred in 2020, when a family of hikers became lost during a flash flood in the desert. According to their account, they were guided to safety by a horseman who appeared during the storm and led them to high ground before the floodwaters could reach them. He didn't speak, but somehow we knew to follow him, the father reported. The horse moved through the flood like it was walking on solid ground, and the rider seemed to glow with his own light. When we reached safety and turned to thank him, he was gone. But we found hoofprints in the mud that glowed blue for several minutes before fading away. The family's account was investigated by federal agents who confirmed the presence of unusual mineral deposits in the hoofprints and documented electromagnetic anomalies at the rescue site. However, the official explanation attributed the rescue to conventional search and rescue operations, despite the absence of any such teams in the area at the time. These ongoing encounters serve as evidence that Jacob Thornfield's transformation continues to influence events in the physical world, more than 140 years after his original act of compassion. The supernatural compact he entered into by saving Ayana's life has created a permanent bridge between dimensions, allowing his consciousness to intervene when circumstances require supernatural assistance. The Apache communities in the region continue to honor Thornfield's memory through ceremonies and traditions that acknowledge his role as a guardian spirit. Annual gatherings at sites near the sacred spring include prayers and offerings for the White Guardian, who proved that compassion transcends racial and cultural boundaries. These ceremonies, conducted according to ancient Apache traditions, serve to maintain the spiritual balance that Thornfield's transformation helped establish. Elder Joseph Whitehorse, great-grandson of Dr. James Whitehorse, serves as the current keeper of the oral traditions surrounding Thornfield's story. In a 2019 interview, he provided additional details about the supernatural compact that transformed the rancher into a guardian spirit. The spirits told Ayana that they were searching for someone who could bridge the gap between the white man's world and our world, Elder Whitehorse explained. They needed a guardian who understood both cultures, someone who could protect all people regardless of their race or beliefs. Thornfield's willingness to sacrifice everything for a stranger proved he was the one they sought. According to Elder Whitehorse, the Apache community has maintained a sacred obligation to protect the spring and honor Thornfield's memory. This obligation includes ensuring that the site remains undisturbed by commercial development or excessive tourism, allowing the supernatural energies to continue their work without interference. The spring is not just a place of power, he noted. It's a living testament to what humans can become when they choose love over fear, compassion over self-interest. Thornfield's story teaches us that the greatest transformations come not from seeking power, but from surrendering everything for the sake of others. The Apache community's stewardship of the site has been crucial in maintaining its spiritual integrity despite ongoing pressure from developers and government agencies. Legal challenges to protect the land have been successful, partly due to the documented historical significance of Thornfield's story and its importance to Apache cultural heritage. In 2015, the site was designated as a National Historic Landmark, though the official designation focuses on its significance to Apache history rather than the supernatural events that occurred there. The designation provides legal protection against development while allowing for limited access by researchers and spiritual practitioners. Dr. Patricia Caldwell, a historian who specializes in frontier supernatural phenomena, has spent decades studying the Thornfield case and its implications for understanding the intersection of compassion and cosmic forces. Her 2018 book, The Guardian's Compact: Supernatural Transformation on the American Frontier, provides the most comprehensive analysis of the events and their ongoing significance. The Thornfield case represents something unique in the documented history of supernatural phenomena, Dr. Caldwell writes. Unlike most accounts of transformation or transcendence, this one is grounded in a simple act of human kindness. It suggests that the universe itself responds to genuine compassion in ways that can fundamentally alter the nature of reality. Caldwell's research has identified similar cases throughout history, though none as well documented or as enduring as Thornfield's transformation. She argues that such events represent a form of spiritual evolution that becomes possible when individuals transcend their own survival instincts in service of others. What makes Thornfield's story so compelling is not just the supernatural elements, but the very human choice that triggered them, she observes. He faced a decision that many of us encounter in various forms, whether to help someone in need when doing so might cost us everything. His choice to act with compassion despite the personal risk opened doorways to realms of existence that most of us never imagine. The psychological aspects of Thornfield's transformation have attracted attention from researchers studying the relationship between consciousness and reality. Dr. Robert Chen, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, has proposed that extreme acts of compassion can trigger alterations in brain chemistry that allow for perception of normally hidden dimensions of existence. The Thornfield case suggests that consciousness is not confined to the physical brain, but can exist in forms that transcend biological limitations, Dr. Chen theorizes. His transformation may represent a natural evolutionary potential that becomes accessible through specific psychological and spiritual conditions. Chen's research, while controversial within mainstream scientific circles, has gained support from quantum physicists who study the relationship between consciousness and reality. Some researchers propose that Thornfield's transformation demonstrates the existence of what they term compassion fields, areas of space-time where acts of selfless love can alter the fundamental structure of reality. The implications of such theories extend far beyond academic interest, suggesting that human consciousness may possess capabilities that conventional science has yet to understand. If Thornfield's transformation was triggered by psychological and spiritual factors rather than supernatural intervention, it raises the possibility that similar transformations could be achieved by others who reach comparable levels of compassion and self-sacrifice. However, attempts to replicate Thornfield's experience have been unsuccessful and often dangerous. The government experiments conducted in the 1990s and early 2000s failed to produce stable transformations, instead creating what researchers termed incomplete entities that posed significant risks to both the subjects and the surrounding environment. Dr. Crenshaw's leaked reports describe these failed experiments in disturbing detail. The subjects underwent partial transformations that left them existing between dimensions, unable to function in either the physical or spiritual realms. They became trapped in a state of perpetual suffering, neither fully human nor fully transcended. The ethical implications of these experiments were staggering, and their failure demonstrated that genuine transformation cannot be artificially induced. The failure of these experiments led to the conclusion that Thornfield's transformation was unique, requiring a combination of circumstances, character, and spiritual readiness that could not be manufactured or replicated. This understanding has influenced current government policy regarding supernatural phenomena, shifting focus from exploitation to containment and study. The modern legacy of Jacob Thornfield's story extends beyond its supernatural elements to its message about the transformative power of compassion. Educational programs in Arizona schools include his story as an example of cross-cultural understanding and the importance of helping others regardless of their background or circumstances. The Thornfield Foundation, established in 1995 by descendants of his Texas family, provides scholarships for students studying conflict resolution and cross-cultural communication. The Foundation's mission statement reflects the enduring relevance of his story. Jacob Thornfield proved that a single act of compassion can bridge any divide and transform not only individual lives, but the very fabric of reality itself. Annual conferences hosted by the Foundation bring together researchers, spiritual leaders, and community activists to explore the practical applications of Thornfield's example. These gatherings have produced numerous initiatives aimed at promoting understanding between different cultural groups and encouraging acts of selfless service. Dr. Maria Rodriguez, current director of the Thornfield Foundation, emphasizes the contemporary relevance of the story. In our increasingly divided world, Jacob Thornfield's example reminds us that our common humanity transcends all artificial boundaries. His willingness to risk everything for a stranger shows us what we're capable of when we choose love over fear. The Foundation's work has been particularly significant in border communities, where Thornfield's story serves as a powerful example of how compassion can overcome cultural and racial divisions. Educational programs use his experience to teach young people about the importance of seeing beyond superficial differences to recognize the shared humanity that connects all people. These educational efforts have been supported by both Apache communities and descendants of other frontier settlers, creating an unusual coalition united by recognition of Thornfield's universal message. The collaboration demonstrates how stories of genuine compassion can serve as bridges between communities that might otherwise remain divided by historical grievances. The ongoing research into supernatural phenomena at the Spring site continues to yield new insights into the nature of consciousness and reality. Recent studies using advanced quantum sensors have detected what researchers term coherence fields around the spring, areas where the normal laws of physics appear to operate differently. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, current director of the research program, reports that these fields seem to respond to human emotions and intentions, becoming stronger in the presence of individuals who demonstrate genuine compassion and weaker around those motivated by selfish interests. The data suggests that the spring has become a kind of amplifier for human consciousness, Dr. Walsh explains. It responds to the spiritual and emotional state of those who approach it, creating conditions that can facilitate extraordinary experiences for those who are psychologically and spiritually prepared. This discovery has led to controlled studies involving volunteers who visit the spring under carefully monitored conditions. While none have undergone transformations comparable to Thornfield's, many report profound spiritual experiences that have lasting positive effects on their lives and relationships. We've documented cases of individuals who experienced dramatic shifts in perspective after visiting the spring, Dr. Walsh notes. They report increased empathy, reduced anxiety about death, and a stronger sense of connection to all living beings. It's as if the site continues to teach Thornfield's lesson about the transformative power of compassion. The spring's influence appears to extend beyond individual experiences to affect the broader ecosystem of the region. Wildlife studies have documented unusual behavioral patterns among animals in the area, including increased cooperation between species that are normally competitive and reduced territorial aggression among predators. Dr. Michael Torres, a wildlife biologist studying these phenomena, has observed that animals in the region seem to demonstrate higher levels of what he terms interspecies empathy. Predators and prey animals have been observed sharing water sources peacefully, and there are documented cases of different species cooperating to protect young animals from danger. It's as if Thornfield's transformation created a field of compassion that influences all living beings in the area, Dr. Torres suggests. The animals seem to have absorbed some of the spiritual energy that transformed him, leading to behaviors that prioritize cooperation over competition. These observations have attracted attention from researchers studying the evolution of altruistic behavior, as they suggest that environmental factors may play a role in promoting compassionate responses across species boundaries. The implications for understanding human moral development are significant, as they indicate that exposure to certain conditions may enhance our natural capacity for empathy and selfless action. The story of Jacob Thornfield continues to evolve as new discoveries shed light on the ongoing effects of his transformation. Each generation of researchers and spiritual seekers finds new meaning in his example, demonstrating the timeless relevance of his message about the power of compassion to transcend all boundaries. As we face contemporary challenges that require unprecedented levels of cooperation and understanding, Thornfield's story serves as both inspiration and instruction. His willingness to sacrifice everything for a stranger reminds us that our greatest strength lies not in our ability to compete or dominate, but in our capacity to recognize and respond to the suffering of others. In the end, Jacob Thornfield's legacy is not the supernatural phenomena that resulted from his transformation, but the proof he provided that ordinary humans are capable of extraordinary compassion when they choose to act from love rather than fear. His story continues to call us toward our highest potential, challenging us to consider what we might become if we had the courage to follow his example. The mysterious horseman may no longer appear as frequently as he once did, but his influence continues to ripple through time, touching the lives of all who encounter his story, and inspiring them to seek their own opportunities to choose compassion over self-interest. In a world that often seems dominated by division and conflict, Jacob Thornfield's transformation stands as eternal testimony to the truth that love is the most powerful force in the universe, capable of bridging any divide and transforming any heart that opens to its influence. And in the deep places of the Sonoran Desert, where the sacred spring continues to flow with water that glows blue in the moonlight, the spirit of a man who gave everything for a stranger continues its eternal vigil, watching over all who travel through the wilderness and reminding us that the greatest adventures begin not with the quest for treasure or glory, but with the simple decision to help another human being in need.